Fujimoto is known for his wide range of portrayal and representations, going from lesbian polycules to boy failures. In my eyes, he is deemed to have some of the best normalized queer representation out there. This feat is especially impressive because Fujimoto, to our knowledge, isn't queer or feminine identifying. He's just some dude who somehow gets it. However, only 2 of his arcs have actually revolved around a queer character, and both of them deal with trans identities. Released around the same time, these stories feel like 2 different answers to the same question, and both depict some of the worst fates a trans person can experience. Enter Togata from Fire Punch and Toshihide from Woke Up as a Girl Syndrome. To truly understand them, some context is needed. Togata is from Fujimoto's first long-running manga, Fire Punch. The story takes place in a snow-covered world filled with blessings, which are basically superpowers that range from metal manipulation, fire manipulation, and most importantly, regeneration. That's where we find Togata, a trans man who has lived for over 300 years with his regeneration blessing. Togata has an apathetic outlook on life, yet is passionate about his motivation to make a movie. His entire life revolves around film. It allowed him to see into the lives of those he couldn't live. Yet after his movies were burned, he wanted to make his own, and that's his simple plot. However, for 90% of his screen time, we are under the assumption that Togata is a woman. He uses feminine pronouns, and doesn't even try to state that he is masculine presenting in the slightest, and the reason for this is brutal. Togata, because of his regeneration blessing, can't get any surgeries done. Whenever he chops off his boobs, they will always regrow. He can't even kill himself. To Togata, image is everything, and to him, he looks undeniably feminine, so what's the point of trying to be anything but a woman? We then have the special case of Toshihide. Toshihide focuses on the physical. Men have dicks. He doesn't have a dick, so he isn't a man. And so if he can't change his body, he might as well acclimate. Once again, we see Fujimoto place a heavy emphasis on physicality in each story. So what Fujimoto did is give us 2 trans men, with the idea of what happens if physical transition is made completely impossible, knowing full well that it's a trans person's personal hell. Both characters are stuck in a body that you can't manipulate or alter, spirals into nihilistic repression. He sees transitioning as something impossible. To go after it, or even pretend that it is a possibility, is cruel. If a dream is impossible, you simply stop dreaming. Toshihide instead takes the gender dysphoria as a disruption of life that he will have to form around. He represents the earlier parts of being trans and having those feelings, trying to convey to those around you that you're still normal, still yourself, while you're still trying to figure out who yourself really is. Across both characters, there's this recurring idea that physicality holds overwhelming power in defining identity. What the body is, or perceived to be, seems to override everything else. For example, who is flaming, so people see him as a symbol of heroism, strength, and masculinity. When anyone looks at Toshihide or Togata, they see the antithesis of masculinity, or at least that's what the 2 believe. After Togata gets forcefully outed, he has a confrontation with Agni. He asks Agni, "When I was outed, was there for a second where you thought I was a dude?" And Agni responds back with, "I mean, yeah, but then I remembered you have boobs, and women have boobs." To most trans people, the idea of being seen as your preferred gender, even if it's only for a second, should be a good thing, but Fujimoto twists it on its head. Instead of happiness, Togata relates the feeling of being seen as a man to the same feeling Agni gets when he sees someone he loves dies. It's one of the most brutal scenes, and it gets even worse a couple pages later, where Agni states how he sees Togata as an older sibling, and offers to call him an older brother. But Togata goes no, older sister is fine, and shows this grim expression. It's gut-wrenching to see even the idea of transitioning being such a torturous idea because it's fundamentally not available. Togata would rather live 300 years of something he is not, than to try to imitate the thing he so desperately wants to be. Like the devil, Fujimoto has created this perfect hellscape to throw trans men into. So now what? What's the point? Well, you might be wondering why these characters are so similar. It's unlike Fujimoto to redo the same character type, especially since Togata, from the longer-running series, came before Toshihide. Well, I talked earlier about how one of Togata's main fixations was films. Movies were his lifeblood, and all the fantastic heroes he looked up to were male. Films were his escape that allowed him to see through a male lens, and he lost that. and because of his regeneration powers, he completely gave up on the choice to ever be a man. He almost turned into an actor, portraying what he thought people would want instead of who he was, never being his vulnerable self, because that's not how people see him, so people would hate it. It's extremely nihilistic. He views himself and who he is as something not worth pursuing, so he just becomes what others want, or an agent of chaos. But it's a path that is understandable. It doesn't end there though. Eventually Agni hits a low, extremely suicidal, about to quit, with Togata on the sidelines. Togata is extremely selfish, to almost an insane degree. Togata's own mindset dictates that he isn't a man, so he can't have a display of vulnerable heroism. It's impossible. He says multiple times to Agni that he would never understand the pain that is gender dysphoria, waking up every day and puking and hating yourself, ironically saying that to the man that is eternally on fire. Agni doesn't pretend he understands though. He says he doesn't understand what he's going through and is still there for Togata. And so, like a superhero, Togata sacrifices himself to save Agni and dies. It's almost so sudden it doesn't feel real. Right when it clicks that Agni cares for Togata, and Togata cares for Agni, and is able to feel like a man, he dies in a sacrificial manner, fulfilling the very ironic dying through sacrifice fantasy that men have. Yet, that's the end for Togata. He never gets to be seen as a man by the people he loves, never accomplishes his dream, and even the idea that he sees himself as a man at the end is just heavily inferred. It's never stated. Togata, the person who would kill himself because he couldn't be a man, but was unable to do so because of his regeneration, and copes by repressing his emotions and becoming a shell for 400 years, finally accepts that he can be a man and instantly dies because of it, because that's what a big brother would do. Torturous, terrible, fuck you, Fujimoto. Though Togata is a very real retelling of what the pain of being trans in a body that is not yours feels like, it doesn't inspire hope, or the will to keep going, or that things will get better because of the very nihilistic world that Fire Punch resides in. I mean, hell, Togata literally kills himself at the end. That's why I think Togata is such a great representation, though, because it perfectly encapsulates the crushing weight of identity. However, Woke Up as a Girl syndrome tries to wrap it up in a nice bow. I personally believe it was Fujimoto's way of really driving home what he was trying to say with Togata's character, almost like an addendum. Fujimoto nails the fear of having feminine traits when you're trying to appear masculine, or having masculine traits when you're trying to appear feminine. It feels like you're working against your identity that you're actively fighting for. It's a painful dichotomy. Gender roles are often inhibiting, limiting, and often a not great social construct. They are like a cheat sheet for when gender dysphoria is really bad. They can be used to ground yourself in your identity. For Toshihide, when he stops crying, he feels like a man. There's even a scene where his girlfriend's brother tells him that a real man would go and get his girl. And so that's what Toshihide does, because he is a man. Fujimoto is brilliant for this. He isn't acting like he knows what the trans experience is. He is taking his experiences of being a man and wanting to fit masculine stereotypes, even with some emasculating qualities, and uses that to try and create queer representation. And that's why it's one of my favorites. He isn't trying to say what he thinks trans people go through. He's using common experiences to bridge the gap. He also doesn't try to convey this large and deep emotion with themes and such. Surprisingly for Fujimoto, it's pretty surface level. At the end, Toshihide tells his girlfriend that self-sacrifice. These two characters are expertly done because he first chooses a foundation that perfectly encapsulates the fear of gender dysphoria, which is never looking like your chosen gender. He doesn't take away from that pain, though, with his theming of, it's what's inside that defines who you are. He isn't saying you shouldn't be hurt by gender dysphoria. What he's saying is that you can be unhappy with how you look, but that doesn't change who you are on the inside. It's simple, elegant, and fantastically executed, and that's why I love it. It also greatly tackles and deconstructs the usage of gender roles when transitioning, and about how whether you act a certain way doesn't determine your gender, but there is almost a reliance on them at certain points. It's almost strange that Fujimoto has that insider knowledge, until you find out that the editor for both of these mangas was a trans person. Overall, the dichotomy cements Togata as one of my favorite trans reps, and I'm really glad the trans community has the literal devil on our side. Hi, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and follow my Twitter. Thank you.